Hi, thank you for joining me, whoever is here for this live. And if you're watching it on the replay, and I know most people do, then thank you for joining me on the replay. Let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rochelle Osaran. I'm a fitness professional certified by ACE, the American Council on Exercise. And I've been doing that for 39 years. I'm a Lamaze certified childbirth educator, also 39 years, a teacher trainer for Lamaze International. Sorry, just, okay, just need to read what's happening here. I'm a certified yoga and Pilates instructor, a certified doula, a mindfulness teacher, and for 38 years I've been helping women and men train their abdominal separation, healing diastasis recti, and strengthening their core. And 2 years ago I put out an online course called Improving Core Function that goes through the whole gamut of everything that, in my opinion and experience and based on research, is necessary to train the core and to improve the abdominal separation. So what is diastasis recti? The official translation of diastasis is separation. It is the rectus abdominis muscles which run from the rib cage to the pubic bone. Those are the six-pack muscles that have often separated. It looks like this. That's normal, and this is separated. What is the cause of the separation? The million-dollar question. It's most likely thought to be from intra-abdominal pressure that is sustained, that is over a long period of time. So pregnancy is the most common cause of sustained intra-abdominal pressure. Our bodies are amazing. We're able to adapt and make space to grow a baby, and isn't that terrific? So the diastasis from pregnancy is not a pathology. It's actually an adaptation to pregnancy, making space to grow a baby. In between those rectus abdominis muscles is connective tissue called the linea alba that's made up of they're called aponeuroses, like tendons of the lateral muscles that go either behind or in some cases over the rectus sheath. So the linea alba is stretched very, very thin from the pressure from the inside, from the pregnancy. But it's not only it's not only the linea alba that has been stretched. The whole abdominal wall has been stretched. Sorry, Instagram is just... Okay. What is the incidence of diastasis recti in pregnancy? According to researchers, 100%. 100% of pregnant women have diastasis recti, usually around the 35th week and beyond. And 6 weeks postpartum, 60% of women have it. 6 months postpartum, 45% of women have it. And 12 months postpartum, 32% of women have it. So you can see that 2/3 of the women who have it, there's a normal, natural resolution of the muscles to their normal place after birth. But 1/3 of women at 12 months postpartum, there is no resolution. And those women usually come to me very often before that, some very soon after pregnancy, and they need to work on it to strengthen their core. So it's not considered a pathology unless it affects the woman's quality of life. There is no research that connects diastasis recti to back pain or pelvic pain. However, if diastasis recti affects the support of the abdominal wall, then yes, a lot of the strain is going to go to the back. And I do find that many women who have diastasis recti have back pain. Not causation, but correlation. Many women with diastasis recti experience bloating. The research shows that it can affect function in terms of flexion and rotation. And many women feel that they have such a weak core that they aren't able to lift things. Now, I'm not necessarily just talking about weights in a weight room. I'm talking about their children, their babies or their toddlers. So research has found that there is an effect on emotions and self-esteem. The woman might be embarrassed to be naked in front of her partner. She spends so much energy all the time, every day, thinking about what clothes she can wear that won't make her look pregnant, because that is the most embarrassing thing for her. If she, in her words, if she sees someone and she's not pregnant and they come up to her and say, "Oh, I didn't know you were pregnant again. When are you due?" So I actually posted a poll on social media. I have 2 Instagram accounts. I have one in English and one in Hebrew. I make reels in English, I make reels in Hebrew. So I posted these separately, and I'm going to give you the separate results because they're different. So in the English poll, I asked, what about diastasis recti bothers you the most? In the English poll, 64% said they hate looking pregnant, 29% said having a weak core bothered them, and 7% said they suffered from back pain. In the Hebrew poll, 91% said that they hated looking pregnant, and 9% said that they had so much fear that they were going to make their situation worse. So with this fear, women stop being active because they don't want to make it worse and they feel overwhelmed and they don't know what to do. But I'm here to tell you that you can get fit and strong and improve the look and function of your core. So how do you know if you have it? And do you need to know if you have it? Do you need to have it diagnosed? So many women notice a kind of doming, this cone-like or pyramid-like feature between those rectus abdominis muscles in their midline when they lift their heads up, when they're getting out of bed, when they're coming out of a bathtub. They don't like the look of their belly. They feel they have a flabby belly. Why, 10 months after giving birth or 10 years after giving birth, do I still look pregnant? So they go to the doctor. Some doctors will check to diagnose them. And I interviewed an obstetrician gynecologist locally a short while ago, and she said that it's not part of their training, so she doesn't know how to check. So either the doctor will check him or herself, or they will refer you to a surgeon. And a surgeon will invariably say that only surgery can repair this. There are no exercises that can, and that's not true. I haven't been wasting my time for 38 years. And if you do want surgery, you need to wait until you have finished having children, because you can't have surgery and then get pregnant again. So women get the idea that there is nothing that they can do about it. They have so much fear about making their situation worse that they stop moving. So I do want to tell you about a woman, a client who has my program. She just bought it recently, my online course. I saw her last week. Young woman, never been pregnant, and I checked her and she does not have diastasis recti. But she came to me because she felt she had a very weak core, and she felt that she wasn't using a helpful strategy to do things, to activate her muscles. She felt she was pushing out. She had felt that she, wanted to work on the look of her abdomen and to get stronger. So I'm telling you this because it's basically the same training, whether or not she has diastasis recti. So, it's not essential to rush to be diagnosed. I do want to say that there is a situation, an umbilical hernia, which some women have. It can go along with diastasis recti. Diastasis, I said, is a separation, but women hear that word and they get the idea that there is a tear in the linea alba, and if they do something too strenuous, their guts are going to come spilling out. Not going to happen. There isn't a tear. It's continuous tissue. It's very thin. However, at the umbilicus, there is a hole. We all have it. That's how we were connected to our mothers, through the umbilicus in utero. So with that intra-abdominal pressure, and as the linea alba, that connective tissue becomes very, very thin and stretched, that hole can widen. And then a bit of fat seeps through, and that changes the look of the navel. Excuse me. So women say, what is this? And they go to a doctor. So this needs to be diagnosed by a surgeon. And the only way to repair it is through surgery. There are no exercises that can repair an umbilical hernia. Almost said the wrong thing. However, most women just, live with it, and they make peace with how it looks, and it doesn't bother them. If the area becomes painful and red, then it's possible that it has expanded. That hole has expanded to the point that part of the small intestine is coming through, and that is a medical emergency that requires immediate surgery. But in most cases, that is not happening. So the check I posted this morning here on Instagram, how to check for those of you who want to check. So usually the woman lies on the floor with her knees bent, and there's a check with the fingers horizontally at the navel, just below the navel and just above the navel. That's to check the distance of the width of the gap, and that's called the interrecti distance, IRD, the gap. It's also important to check the depth, to check the length of the diastasis, and most importantly, to check the tension of the linea alba when the woman activates her abdominal muscles, to see if there is tension in the linea alba when she activates the muscles. If there is, then she is able to transfer load. She's able to load the area, the tissue. There's a woman named Sinead Dufour, I think she's in Canada, who came up with a wonderful way to check tension, to start at the just below the ribs when you're doing a head lift, and to feel that's where there will be most tension because it's closest to the bones. So if that is 5, then going down, usually the least will be at the navel. So what are you feeling? 5, 5, 5, 4, 4, 3, or 2 at the navel, then back to 3, 5. So this is a way to check yourself and you can follow your progress in terms of the tension, because the tension, as I'm going to talk about, will get better with training. So what does the research say about exercising and training the abdomen with regard to the gap, with regard to the interrecti distance or the IRD? Some get smaller, some stay the same, some get bigger. So in terms of, is your diastasis recti getting better? What is better? Can you fit into your clothes? Are you not embarrassed anymore in being naked in front of your partner? Can you lift what you want to lift? Is IRD relevant? Is the gap relevant in these criteria? Usually, no, it's got nothing to do with the gap. So there were studies done pretty much from 2014, which looked at the effect of abdominal strengthening exercises on the gap. The most recent study, really recent, last month, June 2023, published in a journal called Physiotherapy by Benjamin et al. He looked at 16 trials, and he really whittled it down to 6 because he wanted to compare oranges and oranges with people, of similar situations. And he concluded, quoting, "Current conservative interventions, including abdominal strengthening exercises, do not lead to clinically significant reductions in IRD in the postpartum period, but they may have other important physical and psychosocial benefits." He found that the IRD, the gap, closed by 0.29 centimeters. That's like nothing. So it is also my finding that women get stronger, the circumference of the belly gets smaller, they are happier, whether or not there is a change in the gap. Now, I know that there is so much about the gap on the internet that it may sound like I am saying that the world is flat, whereas, we know that it's round. I'm not. I'm quoting research and also my experience. It's not about the gap. Okay, I know that's radical. So what is the most effective measure for tracking progress? And how do you get stronger and look better? It's tension in the connective tissue. Okay, so let's look at something called distortion in the linea alba. Imagine these two things on the sides of the rectus abdominis muscles. Okay, and this is the linea alba. So this is distortion. When it was very stretched in pregnancy, after the baby was born, this is what is distortion. And there is something called a distortion index. It's measured by ultrasound and it's checked in research. That measures the linea alba together with in relation to the shortest distance between these two sides of the rectus muscles. So it's possible to have a small gap and a flabby belly, and it's possible to have a wide gap and a flatter belly. So it's not about the gap. We need tension in the linea alba because when there is tension, then we can load it. The main muscle that tenses the linea alba is the transversus abdominis muscle. This is the deepest set of abdominal muscles, and we're not isolating a muscle. Okay, so it's not the only muscle that tenses it. The obliques, external and internal obliques, also kick in, but it is the main muscle that tenses the linea alba. Now, very often in pregnancy, because this is the deepest set of abdominal muscles and it's closest to the uterus, it is stretched so much that it turns off frequently. And after the woman gives birth, she isn't aware that it is turned off. And she can go through, the rest of her life doing Pilates and whatever without knowing that she is not activating her transverse abdominis muscle. So it is important to train the woman to use it and to use it at all 3 levels. At the level, the lowest level by the pelvis, the middle level, and the upper level. It's important to make sure that they're all working. So what else needs to be working? Well, when we talk about training the core, what is the core? Very often we just think of the abdominal muscles. Well, I want to give you the analogy of a room. Okay, so we have a room in a house. It has a ceiling, a floor, and walls. The ceiling is the diaphragm. So that relates to our breath. The floor is the pelvic floor. and we'll also talk about that. And the walls are the trunk. So the abdominal muscles in front and in the side, and the muscles in the back. The abdominal muscles that come around to the back, the multifidi, back extensors, there's a lot. So we want to make sure that these are all working together, because we know that a room needs to, all the parts support one another, and the same needs to be true for the core. So how do we strengthen the core and train abdominal separation? It's a two-pronged approach. The first part is our body patterns. We need to look at these. What about our daily movement habits or patterns is putting pressure on the abdominal wall and the pelvic floor? And we need to change these patterns. I'll come back to this. And the second thing is learning how to coordinate the diaphragm, that's the ceiling, the breath, with the transversus abdominis and the pelvic floor together, so that we can use all the core muscles effectively, including the rectus abdominis muscle. Okay, so that's the two-pronged approach. So let's go back to body patterns. Alignment, how we sit, stand, move, drive, climb stairs. There isn't one right way. It's just being aware of alignment. So if I am standing, sinking into my joints of my hips, I'm putting a lot of pressure on my abdominal wall and my pelvic floor. I'm not sucking in my belly. I'm aligning the walls of the room. I might have rib thrusting. This is another adaptation of pregnancy. Very often, towards the end of pregnancy, as the uterus grows up, it displaces the diaphragm upwards and decreases the lung depth. Our bodies are brilliant and the rib cage expands. But many women still have a feeling of shortness of breath. So to counter that, to give themselves the feeling of space to breathe, they lift and open their ribs. So this is a body pattern called rib thrusting or flared ribs. The ribs should be stacked over the pelvis. Remember the walls of the room. So I mentioned it's an adaptation to pregnancy. So what happens if I lift and flare my ribs? My back is tightening. Now you can gather the fabric of whatever shirt you're wearing to simulate that lifting and flaring of the ribs, and you'll see that you've tightly scrunched up the back of your shirt. So when you want to train your core, you can't just do a few abdominal exercises. You need to bring your body back into balance. You need to stretch and strengthen your back as well, because of what it's been through. Now you can't just do 2 to 3 YouTube videos that look at abdominal exercises to close the gap. I hope at this point you have that awareness that that's no longer a relevant factor. It will in some. I even have clients, have gone from 8 fingers to 2 fingers, and some have gotten stronger and a smaller circumference without closing the gap. So it's not about the gap. Some people I've also heard instructors talk about straightening, lifting as though you're lifting from thread at the top of your head. Well, that to me leaves me in an arched back position. And a flared rib position. So I do want, and it also causes tension. So it's not a sustainable practice. We need to make sure that the walls of our room are aligned and that the ribs are stacked over the pelvis. Our breath, that's something else related to body patterns. Breath is shape change. There needs to be 360-degree expansion and contraction in the rib cage and the upper belly and the rest of the belly, and even the pelvic canister. Very often, because women are embarrassed about looking pregnant, they might suck in their belly to look better, and that would cut off that possibility of shape change in the abdomen and put pressure down in the pelvic floor, and also create the need to chest breathe, which can cause, these are the secondary breathing muscles, so it can cause tension in the shoulders and the neck, and possibly even headaches. So there isn't one way to breathe. Your breath should be supporting whatever activity you're doing, but it should be 360-degree breath. And to check that out, you can take a pair of tights, put it around by your bra line, and then inhale and feel the expansion all around, including in your back, and exhale. So you're not holding anything in. And actually, your body will do this naturally if we don't get in its way. But we get in its way by, restricting the breath because of a thought that it might look better or whatever. Okay, so another body pattern is the pelvic floor. Very often women are concerned about leaking, so they tighten their pelvic floor and they hold it tight. So that is extremely common. It's that the pelvic floor is too tight, and tight does not mean strong. So it is very important to learn to activate them, to strengthen them, and to support whatever activity we're doing, and to fully release them. So this is my visual aid of a pelvic floor, and these are the muscles of the vagina that I am lifting up. I'm not talking about the sphincters, the other sphincters, the urethra and the anus. I'm talking about the vaginal muscles. So this isn't original. I've heard this is, but I've heard as though you are drawing in a blueberry with the muscles of your vagina. So imagine that you have a blueberry and do what I'm doing. Take a deep breath in. As you exhale, imagine that you are lifting up the blueberry with the muscles of your vagina, and inhale and release it. Okay? Not sure how you did. So for some activities, that's fine and that's all we need. But we're going to soon see that there are some activities that need more than the blueberry. A cherry tomato. Okay, so once again, this time imagine that you are doing this with your own vaginal muscles. So take a breath. Exhale. Lift up your vagina as though you are lifting a cherry tomato in it, and inhale, release. Okay. So very often there is downward pressure. Again, your pelvic floor will know what to do if we don't get in its way. And we get in its way by keeping it tight all the time and by often bearing down. And that's a body pattern that we might have confused in our body, and we need to, relearn a more effective way of activating the pelvic floor. So, coughing. If someone has a cold and a cough, that can cause a lot of pressure on the pelvic floor over an extended period of time. So, I want you to notice what you're doing with your pelvic floor. So, take a breath and cough. Is it going up or is it being pushed out? You can also put your hand on your lower belly, because the muscles of the pelvic floor and the lower belly often work in synergy. So put your hand either on your pelvic floor or on your lower belly, and we're going to do it again. Take a breath and cough. Did you feel that your belly was pushing out against your hand or drawing away from your hand? We wanted to draw away from our hands. So maybe we need to relearn this because it's not doing that. So how can we train it? Well, a cough is quite a stressful activity on the pelvic floor. We can find something a lot less stressful, like bubbles. So imagine that you have them and that you are blowing a bubble while lifting your pelvic floor. Lifting this is just the blueberry, as though you're lifting a blueberry with your vagina. Okay? Not very strenuous. Then you can move on to blowing through a straw into a glass of water. That's a bigger blueberry. Or you can go back to coughing, and that's the cherry tomato, because that does require more activation of the pelvic floor. So try it one last time. Okay. So research has shown that that alignment is really an essential part of the pelvic floor and relates to pressure on the pelvic floor. And research has shown that women who have had surgery for pelvic organ prolapse, 50% of these women who have had a surgical repair have a recurrence within 2 years. So if they haven't changed the cause of the pressure, like alignment, which is what this research referred to, then you've just worked on the symptom and not on the cause. So we've talked about, in brief, body patterns. So let's look at the second thing, and how to coordinate the diaphragm, the ceiling, the breath, with the transversus abdominis and the pelvic floor, together with the rectus abdominis and all the other core muscles effectively. So the connective tissue is made up of the aponeuroses, I mentioned this, of the lateral muscles that go behind or in front of the rectus sheath. And it is a basket weave-like structure. It's a matrix of connective tissue. And there isn't one exercise that contracts it. And I heard on social media recently someone say that the exercise of hollowing the belly and drawing the connective tissue up is the only exercise that activates the linea alba, and that's absolutely not true. So when you activate any of the lateral muscles, they contract outwards, and that is causing that. It's bringing tension into the linea alba. And that is activating the connective tissue. Muscles have red parts and white parts, just to, a brief visual. The red part is the part that contracts, and the white part is the extension of the contraction. It still has the effect of the contraction. Okay, so that's what we need to create tension in the linea alba. And any exercise that contracts the abdominal muscles, especially the lateral ones, is going to cause tensioning in the linea alba. So we're not isolating any particular muscle, not even the transversus abdominis. It is essential that there is tension in order to load it. And we need to load tissue and muscles in order to strengthen them. We need to load connective tissue and muscles progressively. Very often, women with diastasis recti notice doming or sinking. So the doming is a lot more common, so I'm going to relate to that. There is a physiotherapist in Australia named Anthony Lowe. He is one of the most active therapists in the field of diastasis recti and research. And he says that doming is actually a way to load and to tense the tissue. It's intra-abdominal pressure that is not creating too much of a problem, provided that, and he uses the analogy of the balloon, that it's soft doming. like a partially inflated balloon. In other words, if you see doming, imagine that this is the doming, and you press it and it feels soft, that you can really change the shape of it. He says this is not only not a problem, but it is also a means of generating tension. As opposed to hard doming, which is a fully inflated balloon that you cannot change the shape of, that is putting maximum stretch on the connective tissue, and that's something that we don't want. So if you see doming, you can try, firstly, if it's soft doming, it's not considered a problem. And you can also try it in different positions, because when you are lying on your back, there is the least amount of tension in the connective tissue in the linea alba, whereas if you're in a standing position or upright position, your posture muscles are already kicking in to create tension in that tissue. There is a researcher named Diane Lee. She is probably the most famous researcher in the field of diastasis recti. She's amazing. She's in Canada. And in 2016, she published a study with Paul Hodges in Australia, looking at the distortion of the linea alba. Now, I already mentioned what this is. The distortion is, how loose it is in relation to that straight line between the recti muscles. So she looked at the distortion, and she found that is the more effective tool to measure in terms of progress. Now, during the COVID year, she did a lot of real in-depth research, and I heard her present her findings at a summit lecture a few months ago. It hasn't even been published yet, so it's not even hot off the press. It's not in the press yet. But she was looking at the distortion of the linea alba by training these women to fatigue. And she said it improved in everyone. Did the IRD, the gap, improve? In some, yes. In some, no. In some, it got bigger. But everyone felt better. They felt stronger. Circumference of the belly was reduced, and they felt happier. So we must increase the load progressively. We can't just jump ahead and do something that we're not able to do. We need to start from where we are and make sure that we are coordinating all the essential parts together, so that we can then, when there is tension, then we can load it progressively. Stress to progress. We need to stress the muscle in order to progress in strength. Planks. Are we able to do planks? Are you able to do a plank? I don't know. Are you? Can you create tension? Can you draw in your abdominal wall when you're doing a plank against a wall? If yes, try at a lower angle with your hands on your desk on the kitchen counter. If yes, go lower. And that is how you figure out where you are and increase the load. And Diane Lee says that planks and all fours are excellent positions, the forward-leaning positions, because the load comes from the viscera, from the internal organs, provided that you have learned to activate everything and you're using all the components together in unison, and gradually increase the load, managing intra-abdominal pressure, which we need, different from sustained intra-abdominal pressure, which causes diastasis recti. We need intra-abdominal pressure to load the area. There is no such thing as a bad exercise. So, people are only looking for diastasis safe exercises. There's no such thing as a bad exercise. It's how are you doing it? And is it right for you right now? So, that's what you need to determine. Are all the parts, all the components, the walls and ceiling and floor of your room, are they all working in unison. The body adapts to stimulus, and that's how it gains strength. I don't know what your goal is. I do ask people I work with because, you know, it's their goal, it's their life, that's what they want to train towards. For most people, it's to be strong enough and confident enough to do the activities that they love. So, and to improve the look of the belly, which is in most cases, not everyone, but in most cases. There are many other factors that also come into play here that I don't have time to relate to in this live, and that is sleep and stress and nutrition and your mood and genetics. So there's a lot. I mentioned that I have an online course called Improving Core Function. You can find it at improvingcorefunction.com. And it's discounted. It's on sale in honor of Diastasis Recti Awareness Month in July. It's on sale until Saturday night. It's a holistic program. It addresses all the points that I've mentioned here, you know, both in terms of body patterns and in a systematic, progressive strength training workout. It is supported by a Zoom call with me or an in-person session if you want to come to my home. I don't know where you live. So, you know, just to check in, how are you doing? You want me to watch you, how you're doing an exercise that maybe you were having questions about. But it's really, although it's an online course, the tools are so detailed that it empowers you to know what is right for you and how you can have the confidence to progress. I also work privately in person or on Zoom with people, but only people who have my program, because then they've already watched the in-depth videos of alignment and breathing and the pelvic floor and etc. And then I'm happy to really do targeted work with you. I'm passionate about this. I want you to succeed. And if you get nothing else from this live, don't fear movement. So let me see if there are any questions. Nope. Don't see any. Doesn't mean that there aren't. But contact me privately. I'm happy to answer any questions. So thank you for joining or watching the replay, and be in touch. Bye.